But I think as long as you're human and you're able to sit down and talk to people one-to-one or in small groups to get them comfortable to be able to air their views and air their concerns and deal with them, treat people like adults, be honest, if you can't answer a question, then tell them you can't answer it, that sort of thing. No lies. There's no point in losing your integrity or your honesty. Most people will they'll kind of get on board eventually. I had less resistance from some, as you would expect. It was well, thank goodness somebody's coming in and telling us that we've got a future that's going to work. And I had others that were much more cautious about, well, I'm not really quite sure. And those are the ones you have to spend a bit more time with. And ultimately, they're either on board or they're not. And I think if they're on board, and as long as they're willing to continue to develop and adapt, then that's fine. The ones who aren't on board and will never get on board have to be moved on.
Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. I'm Richard Metcalf, founder of X Quadrant, and my mission is to help the world's top CEOs and entrepreneurs shift from incremental to exponential progress and create a huge positive impact on our world. Now, that requires you to reinvent yourself and transform your business. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO. Well, Stuart, it's great to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
So, back in 2016, you were Business Development Director at Equiniti, and then you got the call and joined Holloway Friendly as Chief Executive Officer. And since that time, I know you've led a multi-award winning transformation program to really, I guess, reinvent that business in many areas. So I'm really interested in jumping in as to what that shift's been like for you from being that business development leader to this full-fledged CEO, and what the mission is that lies behind that. So why don't we just jump in? First of all, perhaps in a nutshell, what is Holloway Friendly and what was it that got you to jump into this new role?
Okay, Richard, I'll see if I can answer both of those points. Holloway Friendly is a friendly society, a specialist type of insurance company, and we provide income protection insurance, so disability cover. Somebody's off sick due to accident or injury and their income reduces, we step in and fund that shortfall. The IP income protection market has been around for 150 years. In fact, the founder of Holloway was one of the people that started income protection going back to 1875. Recently, last 2 or 3 decades, most of the market has been driven by growth mindset. Lots of organizations looking for market share growth, volume growth, and all those kinds of things. So big insurers have taken big market shares. The reason why Holloway was attractive to me as a small specialist insurer is because I'm a firm believer that small firms can make quite a big difference in markets if they do things differently. And as you know, my background is almost entirely business development, sales and marketing type roles. But I felt there was a huge gap in the income protection market, that very few people were talking about the real purpose of IP, which is providing claims. So looking after customers when they're at their most vulnerable, when bad things happen to them. So moving from pure commercial hunter type roles into something which is a lot more esoteric and more purpose driven was the real big attractor to me. That combined with the fact that it's the first CEO role I've had, and therefore I can get my arms around the whole of an organization and build it in the way that I've wanted to, including ensuring that I don't do some of the things that I've seen happen in other businesses previously. But the fundamental reason was that shift in looking for an organization which has a mission which is different to the way the rest of the market is operated.
So it was the mission that actually attracted you to that business?
Well, it's creating a mission, I think, and recognizing that, as I say before, most of the market has been driven by new business growth, policy counts and premium incomes and all that sort of thing. We tend to forget that the most important thing that we do in the insurance sector as a whole, income protection just being part of that, is to look after people when bad things happen. So having a business whose mission still is to be there when our members need us the most, when our customers need us the most, and to look after them properly as if we were claiming ourselves is really what sets us apart. And that's been part of the transformation.
It's really interesting because this is a very historic company, right? It's been around for a long time. And so when you joined, did you have a sense that it had lost some of that mission? Because you said I had to create a mission, I create a purpose. So did you feel that it had gone off the rails somehow?
I believe when I joined, it was a business that was well capitalized, but with no direction. So former executives and board members had tried a number of things actually to try to invigorate and reinvigorate the organization, and had tried to look for growth in particular markets. But the inability to execute those strategies was the thing that was really holding the business back. A lot of it was down to bravery, or the lack of bravery, I think. If you're going to be in a specialist market, you need to be able to take on the market opportunities and execute them properly, which I think is one of the reasons why the board wanted a CEO whose background was more business development and less finance at that particular time. So, situational leadership, sure.
What's an example, if I can interrupt, sorry, what's an example of lack of bravery can get away in the way of execution? What kind of things did you see or what did you heard about?
Bearing in mind we're talking about an organisation that's minute, it's very small. There tends to be tinkering around the edges rather than doing something fundamental. So rather than trying to enter brand new markets, which can be quite scary, you tend to end up just doing something that's in an adjacent market, which is no bad thing as long as you can execute properly. So part of the strategy development work before I joined had identified some particular markets that in theory looked attractive. The difficulty, as anybody who's got a background in distribution knows, isn't actually about building the products, it's about taking them to market effectively. So they had built some products which looked okay, but they were unable to take them to market effectively. And therefore, I had to consolidate the existing product range when I first joined to strip it back to its fundamentals and then rebuild from there.
Yeah. So tell me about that. So you went in, you saw that there'd been this longing to do more, few half-hearted attempts, or like we got things, but we're not going the full way. We're not making those brave commitments. So you started to peel things back. And so, what was the nature of that transformation? Like, what did you actually do to perhaps get that organization, which perhaps might have been, I don't know, but it might have been a bit jaded, right? It's tried a few things to get growth going again, and it's not succeeded. What was your game plan as you went in?
Very much top down initially, which was to look at a transformation program that covered all of the fundamentals. So without ignoring the history of the organization and the heritage, because it is important, starting again from first principles, what's the mission, what's the vision, what's the values that we want to operate within, and from there into business strategy, looking at all elements from operations, functionality, IT, infrastructure, products, distribution channel, governance, the whole lot. So that particular project started very soon after I joined, probably about a week or two after I joined. There's no point in hanging around, and took quite a long time to get executed. My objective was to get a strategy signed off by the board by the end of the calendar year, so by the end of 2016, and that's what I achieved, again with input from others.
And that was what kind of time frame?
5 year, yeah, looking for a 5-year plan, 5-year strategy.
5-year plan. But then the time frame for actually creating that vision, you said it was by the end of the year. Was that a 6-month period then, or was it a 3-month?
Yeah, it was about 5 months. It took from start to finish, and it included all the things that you would normally expect in a typical business transformation plan. So target operating model, product sets, markets that you want to operate in, markets that you don't want to operate in, all those kinds of things. So it was a proper strategic review. And at the beginning of 2017, we had a plan, a direction anyway, certainly that the board were comfortable with. We had a financial plan that looked broadly okay. A load of heroic assumptions in there about market share growth and all that sort of thing, but based on experience, not based on made up numbers. And we then moved into execution. And 2017, I started the recruitment of the right team to develop the culture that I wanted in our organisation that was focused on the member, putting our customers absolutely at the heart of what we do. A lot of companies say they do that, but don't really, and we really do. So how we look after people who claim is, in my view, is kind of best in market, really.
Well, this is what I really hear about you is that you move from this kind of hunter business development mindset. You said it before several times that you really wanted to say, well, what happens when people claim? Like, how do we actually fulfill our fundamental promise to customers? And was that something that you kind of went in knowing was going to be a key topic, or like, was that already your industry understanding, or was it as part of this transformation program, going back to first principles, that you identified that this was an opportunity?
I think it was a combination of all those things, Richard. Actually, so BD, as you know, is about deals. It's about winning deals, winning market share, growth, and all that sort of stuff. And you, as a BD director, which I was in a number of organisations, it is just focus on the next deal, focus on the next acquisition, the next whatever it is. But as a CEO, I think you have to do something different, and you have to work out where you can compete in a market or in an adjacent market to the one that exists. And again, you'll have read, I'm sure, blue ocean theory and red ocean theory. And the IP income protection market is not different to any other market. There are 4 or 5 firms who take 80% of the market share, pretty much. They all compete on similar grounds, one of which is price. And if we had followed that same strategy, then we wouldn't be here today, because we can't compete on price with multinational PLCs who've got significantly stronger balance sheets that we have. So it wasn't difficult to identify the fact we needed to do something different. The difference, I think, is about trying to find something that we can do different, that they are unable to copy that quickly. And that's where I ended up focusing on the obvious thing, which is what happens to somebody when they claim. It's the proof point, if you like, for all insurance products. We know that from whether it's motor insurance or travel insurance, life insurance, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. It's what happens when somebody gets into trouble, and whether the insurer can step in and help them. And it means that you move away from chasing pure growth for growth's sake, but you chase growth because it enables you to provide better services to more people. And it's that kind of theory and that kind of belief, that ethos, if you like, that shines through. And we developed here something which is known as the essence of Holloway. And it's about, what does it feel like to be a member of staff? What does it feel like to be an advisor selling our products? What does it feel like, perhaps most importantly, as a customer? So understanding customer journey, understanding the ethos and how it applies to our members. And I say we're a mutual company, so we aren't owned by shareholders, we're actually owned by our customers. And again, that's an important differentiator. We don't have shareholders to pay dividends to. All of the profits that we make go back into providing services for our members. So it's
Yeah, so I love this idea of the essence. Yeah, this idea of looking at the feeling, the emotional connection on the journey. Fascinating. Tell me about your own shift in that journey, because you came from this school of business development, right, where you did pursue the deal. And so, was there any kind of conflict in you between like here I am, I know that my signature strength is my ability to drive the deals. That's why I've probably got to where I got to in business development, and now here I am, kind of doing 5 months of strategy, focusing into the kind of core, slowing down that deal process to really work on other things. Did you feel discomfort in that process? Like, perhaps I'm not going to be delivering what I know how to deliver, or what was going on for you?
the opposite, actually. I think it's the kind of mindset that I've got, which is doing things which are outside your comfort zone is actually incredibly motivating. And I've never had an opportunity to get my arms around every aspect of an organization before joining Holloway. So spinning the business development plate, something which just has to happen in every business. So I outsourced that quite quickly, or delegated it rather, by recruiting an excellent sales and marketing director who knows the market in the same way that I do, and better in some areas. And we developed a distribution strategy together, which he has executed over the course of the last 6 years or so. So that I felt I didn't need to focus as much on the BD side, and that then led me to focus on the things which I've not got the same level of experience in. So part of the excitement is about learning new things. And whilst I'm not an expert on IT and I'm not an expert on operations and Six Sigma, process improvement techniques and that sort of thing, because I'm old and I've been around the market for ages, you kind of know a bit about everything. So I've been able to, again, to recruit people into the team who've got the same ethos, the same belief structures that I've got, who want to build an organisation that does the right thing for members at the right time, that culture. And they have helped me to execute all aspects of our strategy, and that's massively motivational, because it's we're stretching into all sorts of different areas. I didn't know how difficult it was to re-platform an insurance company. I do now, and I've got all of the scars and many more to come, I'm sure. No, you wouldn't want to see them. Don't worry.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to show the scars right now on camera. Tell me about how this program was received, because you said it was quite intentionally quite top down in some ways, and you clearly led it. And I think one thing I sometimes hear in my clients, especially those who are stepping up to bigger challenges, is, oh my word, at this point in my even bigger remit, do I need to go kind of bottom up and really get everybody on board with all the processes? And there's always a tension, right, between that kind of expediency of getting a small group together to figure it out and then sell it, versus getting everybody to collaborate, going slower but having something perhaps with more ownership. So I'm curious as to kind of how you experience that process.
Well, I think situational leadership is the phrase that I would use. So at different times, all CEOs need to be adaptable to change their leadership style. And in a small business that is largely directionless, that has very good people, very capable people who haven't really seen where the future could be, you have to start with a directional strategy. So development strategy directionally. We are going to do this. This is really important because. So the communication of what you're doing and the process you're going through is massively important. So I spent a lot of time, bear in mind I only had 28 people who worked for me at the time, spent a lot of time regularly communicating what we were doing, why we were doing it, where we were in the process, because it's not going to be done in a week. So explaining, next month we're going to be taking the board through our future distribution strategy. Next month after that, we're going to be doing some work on IT strategy and where we see that developing. And as long as the individuals that are involved in those functions see the intention is about creating a better future for the organization and a better future for them individually, hopefully, then I believe it creates what's been phrased before as followership. So giving people enough of a vision, vastly overused word, as we know, but creating an optimistic future. What could this organization actually look like? And what could their part be in that organization? And then literally managing the conflicts that are going to come through, and creating the opportunity for people to say, actually, I don't understand. Can you tell me more? Or wouldn't it be better if? And to be able to answer those objections rather.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation. This is just a quick interlude to remind you that my book, Making Time for Strategy, is now available. If you want to be less busy and more successful, I highly recommend that you check it out. Why not head over to makingtimeforstrategy.com to find out the details. Now, back to the conversation. Tell me about the resistance. Where were people a bit concerned, and how did you deal with that really practically?
There's always concern, I think, when a new leader comes in and says, right, chaps, what we're going to do is something vastly different to what's been going on for the previous 30 or 40 years. But I think as long as you're human and you're able to sit down and talk to people one-to-one or in small groups to get them comfortable to be able to air their views and air their concerns and deal with them, treat people like adults, be honest, if you can't answer a question, then tell them you can't answer it, that sort of thing. No lies. There's no point in losing your integrity or your honesty. Most people will kind of get on board eventually. I had less resistance from some, as you would expect. It was thank goodness somebody's coming in and telling us that we've got a future that's going to work. And I had others that were much more cautious about, I'm not really quite sure. And those are the ones you have to spend a bit more time with. And ultimately, they're either on board or they're not. And I think if they're on board, and as long as they're willing to continue to develop and adapt, then that's fine. The ones who aren't on board and will never get on board have to be moved on. And there was a small element of that in here, but not very much. Not very much. Most people got it, and in fact, most people who wanted to move on self-selected. They didn't require me to go in and say, right, unfortunately, you don't fit anymore. They'd actually worked out for themselves that the future probably wasn't what they wanted, and they decided to go and do something else, and that's fine. And we helped them on that journey. So I didn't get a lot of resistance. The more challenging aspect as a CEO, as you can probably know, is to make sure that you've got the board on side. So we only have 2 exec directors and a number of 5, 6 at the time. In fact, 7 or 8 at the time when I first joined, non-exec directors. And it was making sure that they understood that what they had asked me to do was going to be painful for the organization, because it was going to cost money. There were roles that were going to have to change fundamentally, and we would have to get quite a big bill for changing some of the technology. And as long as they understood that, then that was more of a challenge actually than dealing with colleagues here. And that wasn't easy. That wasn't an easy journey, because some of them ultimately ended up having to be moved on. So some of the non-execs had to go and were replaced by people who were more experienced in our market and who were technically better, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, so you had to really exert leadership on the board side to say, you asked me to do this. This is the cost of what you're asking me to do, and I need you to support me with that. And then, rather than kowtowing if they just push back, you had to kind of have a bigger discussion, which is, well, either I shouldn't be here or you shouldn't be here potentially at some point.
Yeah, that's right. But in fairness to all of the non-execs, they've all been very supportive. The previous set as well as the current ones. And a lot of that, again, comes down to communication. I think if I'd presented them with a fait accompli and they hadn't been involved in the process, and I was asking them to sign off 5 years worth of capital spend, I wouldn't have got where I've got to. So I didn't. What I did was I took them through the journey. So when we developed our IT strategy, it was presented as part of a bigger strategy. And I'm not asking you to sign off an open-ended check today. What I'm asking you to do is to support me during this next phase. So at every stage of the process, the non-execs had an opportunity to say no. And we had some challenging discussions about things on the way, as you can imagine. But ultimately, the belief in what we were doing, the demonstrable outcomes, the successes were starting to be achieved quite early, and that gives the board confidence that they can release funds or allow us to do more. And that was quite interesting. So when I presented the 5-year plan, I presented it as a 5-year plan, but with a 2-year get-out clause. So the 5-year plan is going to look broadly like this. The numbers won't be quite right. The achievements won't be quite right, but directionally, this is what we're going to try and do. There's a load of capital that we're going to need. I'm not asking you to sign off 5 years worth of capital today. What I'm asking you to do is to give me permission to crack on with the first year, build the strategy, get it underway, do the implementation. And at the end of year 2, if we haven't hit the basic objectives, then we have a review. Either we carry on and we know that it's just, it's a timing difference, or we say no and we change tack fundamentally. And that's what works. And that's what I've tried to do ever since. It's no good. Again, explaining to or presenting to the non-execs, this is it. This is what we're going to do, and you don't have any opportunity in challenging or questioning. It is about keeping people on side during that development journey and helping us to think through some of the what ifs. And that's where the non-execs really add significant value. Is they're not involved in the day-to-day work and the day-to-day running of the business, although some clearly like to do that as non-execs, but they're actually really good. They do respect those boundaries, but they have a very good and very objective way of just making sure that we've thought through the things properly.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really insightful. One of the things I often see with CEOs and their management teams is they do need to really exert leadership upwards as much as downwards. No, I just said not dominating, you can't do that, but to really create that leadership where you set out the vision, you explain, the investment of all sorts of things, short-term results, money, time, whatever, that's going to be needed for that, as well as the benefit. And also actually to secure an agreement around this period where we all will be in the investment phase, so that you don't end up with that period where suddenly something happens and 2 months later there's a knee-jerk reaction by the board and you're being thrown off course, which I think, as I heard you said, like you actually try to establish some commitment in the time frame so that they would be with you for the journey. And obviously they were supported you because they were part of those agreements in the first place.
But the interesting thing, I think, to answer your very first one of your earlier questions about the transition from BD to non-BD to CEO, is the principles about business development still apply. So if I'm negotiating with my board and trying to put something forward, I will do it in a consultative selling mode in the same way that I would do as if I was winning a contract with a supermarket to sell insurance. It's the same sort of principle, which is what are the you start from the first principles of what's the problem we're trying to fix, and how can our solution enable that to happen, and therefore what the costs and how do you implement and all those sorts of things. So there are some overarching principles that apply both as in a business development role as they do in terms of a strategic transformation role. I suspect that at some point the style of leadership that this organization needs will be different to what I can bring to it. So you won't need somebody who is driving a driver kind of personality who's really pushing the organization forward. You might need somebody where you can manage for cash flow or you can manage for profit, and that's what happens, and that's okay. All CEOs have got a natural life cycle. I just don't know what mine is here yet. But
So that's a great moment just to reflect. So over the last 5, perhaps 7 years, I think you said now, what's been the biggest shift that you can see in the organization?
goodness, there are so many. At one level, I think the biggest shift is around having individuals at all levels aligned and supportive of what we are trying to do. So they get the plan, they get it, they understand why we are different and how we can continue to be different. Excuse me, in our market. So I would start with the people first. If you then kind of take a step back from that and you go, well, if all the people are aligned, what else has shifted fundamentally? The products have changed, but more importantly, the technology that we have had to install and build ourselves, actually with some help, enables us to improve some of the hard metrics that all businesses need to focus on. So cost of capital, cost of processing, cost of renewals. So automation, more digitization, all those sorts of things. That's a fundamental shift. So when I first joined, my operational colleagues here would be looking at green screens, using a system that's been evolved over, I don't know, best part of 25, 30 years probably. And it was incredibly clunky and very inflexible and all that kind of stuff. And now they've got .NET enabled front ends, back ends, much more automation, easier to change, easier to price, easier to manage, better outcomes for our customers, for our members. So there's been an ethos change, if you like, a cultural change, which is I've got a group of people who really get what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it, combined with some different back office infrastructure, different product sets that enable us to continue to drive, say, some of the hard metrics, both speed of processing, operational efficiency improvements, automation, all those kinds of things.
Got it. Yeah, fascinating. And so those things have shifted. So the people, products, technology, these have all shifted. Let's just look forward for a moment. One of my favorite questions, as you probably know on this podcast, is like, where do you want Holloway Friendly to go in the future? Like where do you see that it could multiply its impact on the industry or on its customers?
So I think that comes back to whether or not the business can grow organically, or whether or not we have to look at corporate strategy, corporate actions. The constraints that small businesses operate on in a regulated environment are driven largely by two main factors. The first one is, can you achieve scale? Can you grow quick enough and efficiently enough to be able to support your infrastructure costs? And the second one, which is a technical point, is around solvency capital. So insurers obviously have to have reserves to make sure they can pay all the claims. I genuinely suspect, that we can probably solve one or other of those organically, but not the other one. So I don't know whether it's a kind of cash flow liquidity stress or whether it's going to be a solvency stress. But at some point, I think we will have to look for either acquisition, merger, or alternative revenue streams that have a different capital signature to the way that our current business runs. So they're quite technical answers, and I apologise for that. But the market opportunity is still big. Consumers still have the same kinds of needs. How they access our markets will change over time. How we underwrite will change over time. The all of the hygiene factors, price and process things will continue to evolve. But if you kind of take a step back and you go up a level and you think about, well, actually the direction of the market will grow. How does a small firm continue to grow? And there are restrictions, there are limits on how quickly we can grow because of the lack of scale and the fact that we need to continue to put more money into reserves for claims. So I think those will be our biggest strategic challenges over the next 5 years, probably.
Yeah. And what would your sense of ambition be? Like, what would you love to, what would you love to achieve in that business, or what would you love the business to see to do as it grows?
Well, in the last 5 years, we have doubled our customer base and we've doubled our revenue. And I would like to think that in the next 5 years we could do that again. So I don't see if we can manage the capital and the liquidity in the way that we need to, the cash, then doubling the organisation scale should be possible. Obviously, if we are able to look at inorganic options, then you would multiply that by a factor. So I think my ambition is about building a sustainable business over the longer term that that continues to challenge the market. I mean, we've won awards for all sorts of things over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, and I think we should continue to have that ambition to challenge the market a bit, to pick off things where we can make good decisions and earn some profit for our members. And I think those opportunities still exist, whether it's looking at the market in a different way by breaking it down, looking at subsidiary markets, or whether it's about a broadening more of a waterfront product range and things like that. There's lots and lots of different options.
Yeah, I love this. So I love the fact that you've really focused in on this core service that you provide, right, rather than being deal led. So I think there's a lot there that you have to give to the market, as you've made very clear. Let me ask you, on a personal level, as chief executive, what's it going to take for you to multiply your impact within the business? Looking forward, what's the stretch for you as you kind of consider the next couple of years?
And I'm sure the answer that I'll give you will be the same as you hear from a lot of CEOs, which is about creating the bandwidth, creating the time to focus, to be able to focus my time and my exec colleagues' time on those longer term issues and opportunities. So I think that's the real big challenge when you've moved from a large organization to a small organization, which most of us have on the exec here. There's a recognition eventually that happens quite quickly that the team resources aren't there to be able to do the work that you think needs to be done. So you either decide not to do the work or you do it yourself. So we have an executive team that is very hands-on in terms of managing, leading, changing things that happen in the business. And I think our biggest opportunity is to create the bandwidth for that group of people. There's only 4 of us, to step back for some weeks or months and actually start thinking about and doing some work on developing the next 5-year plan and picking up these challenges, picking up the liquidity challenge, so cash flows, and picking up the solvency challenge, and working out what we could do. And the constraints, I think, are probably twofold, Richard, really. One is around us having the willingness to make the change and to allow our senior leaders to get on with running the business on a day-to-day basis. We have a very good senior leadership team. But I think that we probably are too involved on a day-to-day basis with some of the activities. So the second part, I think, of that is about ensuring that leadership team has got the capabilities, and we've helped develop them to be able to take decisions which we are currently taking. So it's how far down do you delegate those big decisions? So I think it's around those things, creating the time and enabling the next tier down to be able to run the business on a day-to-day basis. So we have to invest now in ensuring that the senior leaders here can do the work that we think needs doing.
Yeah, but you create that multiplication culture, right? And that probably is a great place to end our conversation. So Stuart, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think I've loved this shift that we've talked about from this business development deal driven mindset, which obviously can create results, to this broader CEO mindset of where do we play, where do we have competitive advantage, right? How do we actually create value for people? And then I love this process that you went on, which was, there was the intellectual part of it, very clear. And there was also that emotional strand. In fact, we could have spent even more time on that. But this point around, what does it feel like to be a part of this company? What does it feel like to even be a customer of this company? And I think that in some way is such a great internal decision-making filter that I think many companies don't actually use. So I think that's a great insight. And then I think, again, we had a great discussion around the board, around leading upwards, using consultative selling approaches actually to make sure they get aligned and they're supportive of investments that you might need to make for that breakthrough future. So it's been a really fascinating conversation. We've covered some other things as well, but perhaps that's enough to kind of wrap up for now. If people are interested in finding out more about you or about the business, where should they best do that?
Probably easiest through LinkedIn. Just ping me a note through LinkedIn, a private message or something, and I'll come back to them.
Perfect. Well, Stuart, it's been a great pleasure. Look forward to seeing how the business evolves over the coming years, and whether you grow organically or make some bold moves. We'll have to watch the space to find out. Thanks again for joining us. Well, that's a wrap. If you received value from this conversation, please do leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We'd deeply appreciate it. And if you'd like to check out the show notes from this episode, head to xquadrant.com/podcast, where you'll find all the details. Now, finally, when you're in top leadership, who supports and challenges you at a deep level to help you multiply your impact? Discover more about the different ways we can support you at xquadrant.com.